She hired him to clear the silt out of a dead mill race, and she paid him in copper, and she did not know she was paying a duke. That was the joke of it, though no one in Greywater was laughing yet. The man who walked up the mill lane that first afternoon, with road dust in the creases of his neck and a coat worn carefully thin, owned more of England than Eliza Wren would ever stand on. He owned the bank that owned her debt, though he did not yet know that himself. He owned a house with a name and 100 rooms and a staff who said, "Your Grace," into the carpet when they spoke to him. He had walked away from all of it with a stick and a knapsack, because a man who has only ever bowed to begins to wonder whether anyone in the world would speak to him as a man. His name was Nathaniel Hale, Duke of Wycombe. To Eliza he gave the name Nathaniel Hale and stopped there, and let her believe the rest of him was nothing. She believed it gladly. She had a wheel half rotten at the axle and a guild that would not lend her a shilling, and the whole town politely waiting for her to fail, and she did not have the time to wonder where a journeyman had learned to stand so straight. Remember the copper she counted into his hand that first evening. Remember it, because everything that came after, the wager, the dancing, the night she showed him her ruin, the day a crested carriage rolled into her yard, and a stranger said 2 words that broke her open in front of everyone she knew, all of it grew out of that small honest coin. If a story like this one finds you, stay with it to the end. The lie is only half of what happened at Greywater Mill. The other half is what she did about it. 6 months her father had been in the ground, and in 6 months Eliza had learned exactly how a town buries a woman it has already decided is finished. They did it kindly. That was the part that scraped. Old Mistress Pellow brought broth and stayed to say how hard it was. A young woman alone, no husband, the mill so heavy, and was Eliza quite sure she would not be happier in service somewhere genteel? The Reverend prayed for her with one eye on the rot in the roof beam. The Millers' Guild sent a letter that called her father a fine man twice, and declined her request for credit once in the last line, where it counted. She kept the mill running anyway. She rose before the gulls, and she went up onto the wheel platform with a lantern and a long iron bar, and she worked the gate by hand because the sluice mechanism had seized in the spring, and 3 hired men had failed to mend it before they took their pay and went off to easier wages. Grinding grain was the one thing in the world Eliza Wren did better than anyone for 20 miles, and it was the one thing nobody would let her prove, because the wheel that turned the stones turned slower every week, and slow flour is bad flour, and bad flour empties a mill faster than any rumour. That morning she had 11 sacks where her father would have had 40, and she had done the arithmetic so many times it no longer felt like numbers. It felt like a hand at her throat. "You could sell to Crail," said Hesketh behind her. The old foreman had worked the Greywater stone since before she was born, and he said the man's name the way other people said the word debt. He'd give you a fair price. You'd walk away with something. "I'd walk away with nothing and call it something," Eliza said. She did not turn from the gate. "My father bought this wheel the year I was born. He is not going to lose it the year he died." "Your father," Hesketh said, gentle, "is past minding. I'm not." Down in the yard, her brother Tom was feeding the one goat they had left, and arguing with it about the principle of the thing, and his voice came up thin and bright through the cold. 14 years old, all wrists, the only person at Greywater who still expected the day to go well. Eliza watched him a moment, and something in her went hard and clear, the way it did when the choice was easy, and only the doing of it was hard. She would not sell. She would find a man to mend the gate cheap, and she would make the 11 sacks into 40 before Michaelmas, and she would shove the whole town's pity back down the lane it came up. She had got that far in the plan and no further, when the stranger came up the lane. He came on foot, and he came slow, and he stopped at the edge of the yard and waited to be seen instead of shouting up at her. That last part was what she marked. Men who wanted work usually came in loud. "You're looking for someone," he said when she had climbed down. It was not quite a question. "I'm looking for 40 things and can afford none of them." She wiped her hands on her apron and looked at him, the way she looked at a sack of grain she suspected of damp. Tall, older than her by some years. The weather had got at his face, though not for long. There was a softness under the brown that real labourers wore off by his age. His clothes were poor enough. His hands, when she made herself look, were not, and that was the first small wrong note, the first thing she filed away without quite knowing she had done it. "I do a bit of everything," he said. Carpentry. Stonework. I've worked water before. Mills. Weirs. He glanced past her at the wheel and something crossed his face. Interest, she would have called it, if interest made sense in a man begging a day's labour. Your gate's seized. My gate is the worst job in Cornwall, Eliza said, and I can't pay what it's worth, and the last 3 men who tried it gave up by noon, and one of them I think was actually crying. So before you tell me what you can do, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you the tail race. The tail race? It's silted to the lip. It needs clearing by hand, in the cold, in the muck, with the water coming through whether you like it or not. Clear it, and we'll talk about the gate. Quit at noon like the others, and you'll have wasted a morning, and I'll have lost nothing. She held his eyes. Don't mistake any of this for charity. I haven't got the funds for charity. The day you cost me more than you earn, you're gone, and I won't be sorry. She expected him to balk. She was, if she was honest with herself later, hoping he would, so she could go back to being alone with it, which was at least a grief she understood. He set his knapsack down against the wall, took off the poor coat and folded it, which no labourer alive would have done, and rolled his sleeves. "Where do you keep the spades?" he said. It was a duke who asked it. Eliza had no idea. She knew only that something in her chest, clenched tight since the funeral, eased a quarter turn for no reason she could name, and that the easing unsettled her, and that she pointed at the shed and turned away before he could see her face. He did not quit at noon. She watched him from the platform between her own chores, telling herself she was making sure he did not steal the spade. He worked the tail race the way she imagined a man might dig a grave he had strong feelings about, steady, joyless, complete. By the second hour his fine poor coat was forgotten, and his shirt was black with the muck, and he had a long smear of silt up one cheek, and he had cleared more in half a day than the crying man had managed in 2. At the worst of it, where the silt went to the consistency of cold tar, she saw him stop, brace his hands on his knees, breathe, and then go on. He did not look up at the house to see if she was watching. That, more than the digging, was what undid her caution. A man performing for the mistress looks up. This one had gone somewhere inside himself where she was not. Tom took to him on contact, the way 14 takes to anyone who treats it like a person. By the afternoon the boy was down in the muck handing him stones and asking him whether he had ever seen the sea past Falmouth, and whether it was true there were fish as long as a man, and the stranger answered every question seriously, which won Tom for life. Hesketh watched from the doorway with his arms folded and his mouth folded tighter. "Soft hands," the old man said to Eliza low. "They're not soft now. They were this morning, and listened to him talk." She had listened. That was the trouble. The stranger said his words too cleanly. His vowels sat up straight. When Tom asked him a hard question, he paused before answering like a man choosing among true things rather than scrambling for one. It was the speech of a schoolroom, not a hiring fare, and it did not match the coat, and Eliza filed that away too in the same drawer as the hands, and shut the drawer, because she needed the tail race cleared more than she needed to understand him. At dusk she counted copper into his palm. Not much. He looked at it as though the smallness of it were a curiosity, then closed his hand. "You'll come back tomorrow," she said. "Is that the wage or the gate?" "It's the gate. If you can mend the gate, you have the harvest season. After that we part friends or we part. Either way, I make no promises past Michaelmas." She paused. "What do I call you?" "Nathaniel," he said. "Hale." It came a half-beat slow, the surname, the way a man reaches for a thing he keeps in an unfamiliar pocket. She heard it. She would think of it many times later, that small hitch, and curse herself for hearing it and saying nothing. But that night she only nodded, because a name is a name, and she had a mill to save, and the man could dig. He came back the next day. He never really left. By the end of the first week he had mended the gate. He did it the way no one in Greywater had ever seen it done. Where the village millwrights would have replaced the seized rack and hoped, Nathaniel rigged a counterweight off the headstock, a clever cantilevered thing of stone and chain that took the load off the failing iron and let one person raise the gate that had taken 3 before. He explained it to Hesketh in plain words. He explained it to Tom in funny ones. He could not, it turned out, quite explain how he had known to do it. "Where'd you learn that?" Eliza asked him on the platform, with the new gate sliding sweet and the water going where she told it for the first time since the spring. "Read it in a book once," he said. She looked at him. He looked at the water. Journeyman read books on hydraulics, she said. This one does. He said it light, with the dry edge she was learning to expect from him, the wit he kept folded away and only opened when she was near. She let it go. She told herself she let it go because the gate worked and the wheel turned full for the first time in a year, and the great stones came up to speed, with a sound she had not heard since her father was alive, a deep, contented grind that she felt in her teeth and her chest and somewhere lower than either. She told herself that was why she laughed. She had not laughed in months. It surprised her more than him. It came out of her loud and unguarded, both hands on the rail, head back, and when it was done she found him watching her with an expression she could not read and did not know was hunger. Not for her, not yet, but for the thing itself, the being, the cause of it. Here is what Eliza could not see, and what you should. Nathaniel Hale, Duke of Wycombe, had spent his whole life being the reason people performed. They laughed at his jokes because he was a duke, and they cried at his griefs because he was a duke, and not one soul since his father died had ever laughed like that, helpless and surprised because of something his own two hands had made. Flattery he knew to the bone. He could have papered the walls of Greywater in flattery. This was a new coin entirely, and it was minted in a flour-dusted mill yard by a sharp-tongued woman who thought he was no one, and he stood on the platform and understood, with a quiet that frightened him, that he did not want to go home. That was the moment the disguise stopped being a holiday and started being a debt. He felt it land. He said nothing. He had got very good over the years at saying nothing. Crail's man came by, Hesketh said that evening, breaking the warmth like a thumb through a crust. Down at the anchor, telling everyone Greywater couldn't grind a sack of meal if you put a gun to it, saying the wheel's done and you're done and the only question is when. Eliza's jaw set. Crail's man can... There's a wager in it, Nathaniel said. They both looked at him. He's saying you can't grind. So, grind. Outgrind the Crail mill by the fair, every sack, weighed and witnessed. Make the town watch you do it. He had that light dry edge again, but under it something had gone keen and certain, the voice of a man who had read a room and seen the move. If we lose, I'll work the next month without pay. If we win, the town stops waiting for you to fail. You can't buy that, and Crail can't talk it back. You'll work a month for nothing on a bet you might lose. I'm a journeyman with 2 shirts, he said. It's not a large estate to gamble. She should have heard it. 2 shirts. The man had a turn of phrase like a sword in a velvet sleeve, and she was too busy doing arithmetic to draw it out. She took the wager. They shook on it in front of Hesketh, and Tom whooped, and that was the night Greywater stopped being a place where a woman waited to lose, and became a place where 2 stubborn people stayed up too late by lantern light building, something out of spite and stone. Late, mending a cracked board on the wheel by the last of the light, she heard him swear, quietly, viciously, when a splinter went into his thumb, and the words were not English. She knew the shape of Latin from the Reverend's mouth, though not the meaning. She looked up. A journeyman with Latin, she said. He pulled the splinter, unhurried. A journeyman with a bad temper and a long memory of being made to recite. It was almost true. It was nearly the truth, which is the most dangerous kind of lie, and it slid past her because she wanted it to. She handed him the rag for his thumb, and their hands met around it, and neither of them let go quite as fast as the task required, and the wheel turned beside them in the dark, full and sure, and the lie sat between them like a coin neither would spend. They won the wager at the midsummer fair, and the winning of it changed the weather of the whole town. It was done properly in the open, on the green by the harbour, with the gild reeve to weigh, and the anchor's whole custom to watch. Crail's mill sent its sacks, and Greywater sent its sacks, and the Greywater sacks were more and finer, ground bright and even off a wheel that ran like a clock, and when the reeve called the count, the green went up in a noise Eliza felt in her sternum. Men who had brought their grain to Crail for 2 years came to her by the end of the afternoon with their caps in their hands and their custom in their carts. Mistress Pellow, who had wanted her in service, kissed her on both cheeks and claimed to have known all along. The town turned, the way a town does, all at once and pretending it had never faced the other way. Eliza stood in the middle of it with flour on her sleeves and could not stop her face from doing something she had nearly forgotten how to do. It was a good day. You should hold on to it, because it is also the day 3 things were planted that would come up later as a harvest of grief. The first was Crail himself. He came in person, which he rarely troubled to do, a soft, well-dressed man with a soft, well-dressed voice, and eyes that priced everything they touched. He found Eliza by the weighing board, and he was all warmth, all congratulation, a neighbour delighted at a neighbour's spirited little revival. He used those words, spirited little revival, and smiled while he used them, and the smile told her exactly how small he had decided she was. "You've a gift for the dramatic, Miss Wren," he said. "Your father had it too. I do hope the figures keep pace with the theatre." He let that sit. "His note to me comes due at Michaelmas, of course. I shouldn't like a day like this to make anyone forget their arithmetic." "I never forget my arithmetic, Mr. Crail." "No," he agreed pleasantly, already turning away. "I don't suppose women like you can afford to." "Women like you?" He said it the way a man flicks ash. She kept her chin level and let him go, and she did not let her face change, but the words went into her like a splinter, and stayed, and somewhere underneath the day's good noise a clock began, quietly, to count down to Michaelmas. The second thing was a stranger at the edge of the crowd, a passing gentleman in a good coat, down from somewhere, watching the dancing. Eliza only noticed him because Nathaniel went still. She had never seen Nathaniel go still like that, a stillness with fear in the spine of it, and then he turned his face away fast and found a reason to be on the other side of her, putting her body between his own and the man's line of sight. The gentleman squinted, half rose from the bench he sat on, and then a fiddle struck up and a knot of dancers crossed between them, and the moment passed, and Nathaniel breathed again. Eliza saw all of it. She did not understand a particle of it. She filed it in the drawer with the hands and the Latin and the 2 clean vowels, and the drawer was getting full. The third thing was the dance. She had not meant to dance, but Tom shoved her, and the music was good, and Nathaniel held out his hand with that dry look that dared her, and she took it because she could not, in front of the whole turned town, be seen to be afraid of a country reel. They were clumsy at first, both of them, laughing at it, and that was fine, that was lovely. That was 2 tired people being foolish on a summer evening. Then the music changed to something slower and statelier, the kind of measure the gentry danced in rooms Eliza had never entered, and for the space of perhaps 8 bars Nathaniel forgot himself. His hand changed on her back. His spine changed. He led, not the way a mill hand leads, hauling and hoping, but the way a man leads who has crossed great floors under chandeliers, turning her with a small, certain pressure that knew exactly where her weight was, and exactly where it was going next. For 8 bars Eliza was dancing with someone else entirely, someone fluent in a language she did not speak, and she felt the wrongness of it run up her arm like cold water, and she looked up into his face. He saw her see it. He pulled it back, went clumsy again on purpose, made a joke of his own feet, but it was too late. The thing had been shown. They came to a stop close together with the fiddle still going, his hand still at her back, his mouth a breath from hers, and the whole summer narrowed to the half-inch of air between them, and Eliza thought clearly, "I am going to let him," and was glad of it. "Liza!" Tom barrelling up, all elbows, wanting a coin for the sweet stall. The half-inch broke. They stepped apart. Nathaniel gave Tom the coin and would not meet her eye, and the moment lay on the ground between them, not picked up. She walked home alone with him an hour later, the harbour dark and silver, the fair behind them. "I don't know who you were before Greywater," she said. She kept her eyes on the road. It cost her something to say, and she said it plainly, the way she said everything. A man dances like that, talks like that, flinches from a stranger like that. There's a before, and you've sealed it shut, and that's your right. But I find I don't want to know it. I've got enough that's broken to mend. I haven't room to mend you as well. She stopped, made herself say the last of it. "So, whatever it is, don't make me regret not asking. That's all. Don't make me regret it. Walk that road with them and feel how the irony bites." She was asking him, as plainly as a proud woman can ask anything, not to be the thing he was. And he, who had a name and a title and a whole stolen before folded into the lining of his poor coat, who could have ended her every fear with 3 honest words, looked at the harbour and the woman beside him and said the only thing that was both kind and false. "There's nothing back there worth your regret," he said. "I'm exactly what you hired." "Good," she said, and believed him, because she wanted to, and they walked on. A month folded by like that, and it was the best month of either of their lives. It built out of nothing but work and weather. The custom held, the new gate held, the wheel ran, and the books, which had been bleeding, slowed their bleed to a trickle. Nathaniel learned the rhythm of the place until he was no longer a hired man in it, but a part of it. Fixed the roof Tom kept threatening to fall through, taught the boy to splice a rope and to do sums in his head, sat with Hesketh of an evening until even Hesketh thawed a degree and admitted, grudging, that the man could work. And in the corners of the days, the small ones, Eliza and Nathaniel built the other thing, the unnamed thing, out of past tools and shared bread and arguments about the proper way to set a stone and long companionable silences on the platform with the water going by. He had never been wanted as a man. He thought it, lying awake in the loft over the grain. He had been wanted as a fortune, and wanted as a title, and wanted as a way out of someone's troubles, by mothers and by daughters and by a fiancé years ago, who had married a man with better lands and sent him a kind letter about it. He had never once in 30 years been wanted by someone who thought he had nothing, simply because of how he was in a room. Eliza Wren did not want a single thing he owned. She did not know he owned anything. She wanted the man who mended her gate and made her brother laugh and stayed up too late arguing about millstones. And Nathaniel found that he would have given the whole dukedom, the house and the name and the 100 rooms, to go on being only that man. He should have told her then. He knew it even then. The longer the truth waited, the heavier its landing. But every day he did not tell her was another day of being wanted plainly, and he was a starved man at a table, and he could not make himself push back the chair. She showed him the books on a night near the end of that month, and that was the night the lie put down its roots. She had not meant to, but the quarter day was coming, and the figures had crept back into her sleep, and he found her at the table past midnight with the ledgers open, and her face in her hands, and he did not say a useless thing or a soft thing. He pulled out the other chair and sat and said, "Show me," and after a long moment she turned the books around and let another person see Greywater's true ruin for the first time since her father died. It was worse than the town guessed, far worse. Her father had borrowed against the mill twice over in his last bad year, borrowed from Crail at terms that made Nathaniel's jaw tighten when he read them, and the midsummer triumph that had turned the whole town's head was, against this column of figures, a cup of water against a fire. At Michaelmas the note came due in full. There was no full. There was a fraction and a brave face, and the certainty that Crail would take the mill the legal moment he was able, because Crail had wanted the Greywater wheel and the Greywater water rights for years, and had only been waiting for a wren weak enough to take them from. "There," Eliza said, when he had read it all. Her voice was flat, and her eyes were bright and angry at herself for the brightness. "Now you've seen it. Now you know I'm not a spirited little revival. I'm a woman keeping a corpse warm and charging the town to watch." She shut the book. "I've never shown that to a living soul. I don't know why I showed it to you." "Because I'd have known anyway," he said, "and because you're tired of carrying it alone. Those are good reasons." And here Nathaniel made the choice that ruined everything, and he made it out of love, which is the worst way to make a ruinous choice, because it feels so much like virtue while you do it. He could have told her. The truth was right there, an arm's length away, simple as a coin on the table. "I am the Duke of Wycombe. Crail's note is nothing to me. I will pay it tonight, and you will never fear that man again." 3 sentences. He held them in his mouth, and he did not say them, because he could see, with the clear cold sight that had let him read every room he ever walked into, exactly what would happen if he did. She would not take it. She was a woman who had refused the town's pity and the guild's charity and her own neighbour's broth. She would not take a duke's gold across a midnight table, not from a man she had hired in copper, not for any price including her own ruin. She would send him down the lane by morning. The plain wanting would be over. He would become, in the space of 3 sentences, exactly the kind of man she had asked him on the harbour road never to be. So he chose the coward's kindness. He would fix it without her knowing. He would reach back into the life he had run from just once, just quietly, and lift Crail's hand off her throat in the dark, and she would wake to find the threat simply gone, a mercy with no giver, and she would never have to take anything from anyone. He told himself it was for her pride. Some of it was for her pride. The rest was for the table, and the wanting, and the chair he could not make himself push back. What he said aloud was true, and was the first time he had said any of it. "I have spent my whole life," he said slowly, "in places where everyone knew my worth to the penny, and no one knew me at all. This is the first time I've felt like a real person and not a thing other people calculate. Here, with you. I don't want to lose it." He looked at her. "Whatever happens with Crail, I need you to know that. Staying here, like this, with you, it's the only time I've felt real." It was the most honest thing he had said since he walked up the lane, and it was wrapped around the largest lie, and Eliza heard only the honesty. She came around the table and kissed him, and he kissed her back like a man who had been thirsty for years, and for a while the books and the note and Michaelmas were 100 miles away. She fell asleep against him near the dying fire, and when she slept, the Duke of Wycombe sat at a miller's table by the last of the coals, and wrote a letter in a private cipher to Mr. Oquez, his man of business, a man who had not heard from his master in months, and would weep with relief to see the hand. "By the Greywater note from Crail," the letter said, "quietly, through agents. Let no name attach to it, least of all mine. Pay what he asks and more if he balks. Tell no one." He sealed it. He looked at the seal a long moment, the Wycombe crest pressed into the wax out of pure, unthinking habit, and he did not, in the warmth and the relief and the closeness of her sleeping weight, think hard enough about who in a small harbour town might one day see it. He had built the trap. He had baited it with his own kindness, and he went up to the loft almost happy, which is the cruelest part of the whole story, that the worst thing he ever did, he did while feeling for once like a good man. 3 weeks later, the strike came, and it came the way Crail did everything, by post, under seal, with a smile folded into the cruelty. He had learned that someone was inquiring after the Greywater note. He was not a stupid man. A stupid man does not hold half a town's debt. An anonymous buyer sniffing at a debt he had waited years to collect told him the prize was worth more than he had thought, and rather than sell, Crail moved to take it before the unknown buyer could. The letter that came to the mill called the loan early. It cited a clause her father had signed half-drunk and desperate, a clause that let the lender demand the whole sum on short notice at his discretion, and it demanded the whole sum within the fortnight, in full, in coin, knowing she had a fraction and a brave face and no more. Eliza read it standing in the yard, and the colour went out of the day. "He can't," she said. "Within the fortnight he can't. No one could." "He can," Hesketh said quietly, reading over her shoulder. "It's in the clause. Your father signed it. He can call it whenever he likes, and he's liked it now." The old man's face was grey. "He means to have the mill, miss. He always did. We're done." "We are not done." But her voice shook on it for the first time, and Tom had gone white by the goat pen, and the world she had clawed back at the fair was coming apart in her hands. "I'll find the money," Nathaniel said. He said it too fast. He said it the way a man says a thing he already knows how to do, and Eliza, with the letter shaking in her hand, turned on him with all the fear in her looking for somewhere to land. "You'll find the money?" She stared at him. "You, a journeyman with 2 shirts and a knapsack. You'll find, what is it, 3 years of this mill's whole income in a fortnight. How? How will you find it, Nathaniel?" And he had no answer that was not the truth, and he would not give the truth, not like this, not in a panicked yard with Hesketh listening, where it would land as a bomb and not a gift. So he said nothing useful. He said, "Trust me, let me try." And the not answering, the second pause where the truth should have been, opened the first real crack between them, a hairline of suspicion running straight through the middle of the best month of her life. It widened that same evening. Hesketh found her on the platform. "I'll say this once, miss, because I'm fond of you, and I was fond of your father." The old man would not look at her. Your Nathaniel's been down at the coaching inn, posting letters. I've seen him twice, and the last one he set down to seal it, I saw the wax, plain as I see you." He swallowed. "It was a crest, miss. A great man's crest, pressed in proper. Working men don't have crests. Working men can't write the hand that needs them. I don't know what he is. I know he's not what he told you, and I know that's the worst kind of man to trust with a sinking thing." The drawer Eliza had kept shut all summer came open all at once. The hands, the Latin, the vowels, the dancing, the stranger at the fair he had hidden from, the book on hydraulics no journeyman reads, the pause in the yard where the answer should have been, the crest. Each thing alone she had explained away. All of them together made a shape, and she did not yet know the name of the shape, but she knew it was a lie, and she knew she had built half a year of her heart on top of it. She confronted him that night. She did it plainly, the way she did everything, in the loft with one lantern between them. "Hesketh saw the seal," she said. "A crest. Tell me what you are." For a long moment he said nothing. She watched him weigh it, watched the truth climb right up to the back of his teeth, and then again choose to wait, because the plan was 3 days from finishing, and he thought, fool that he was, that he could still hand her a solved trouble instead of an unsolved confession. "Give me 3 days," he said. 3 days, and I'll tell you everything, and the note will be, Eliza, in 3 days this is over and you keep the mill and then you can decide what to do with me. I'm asking you to trust me for 3 days. Trust you. She laughed, and it had no warmth in it. I've trusted you all summer. I showed you the books. She stopped, made her voice flat. 3 days. 3 days? She should have thrown him out. She knew it. Every hard practical instinct she had ever owned told her to send the liar down the lane and face Crail alone with her eyes open. But she loved him. She let herself use the word for the first time, alone, after, and hated how true it was. And so she did the thing that love does, the dangerous thing. She gave him the 3 days. She trusted the specific man who was specifically lying to her, on the strength of a feeling, against all her own judgment. That is the trust the next day broke. Remember that it was that trust, freely given, against her own sense because she loved him, and not merely the lie, that the reveal destroyed. The lie was bad. The breaking of that trust, on that of all days, was what she could not forgive. She got 2 of the 3 days. On the 3rd, the carriage came. It was the harvest feast, the town's high holiday, and the whole of Greywater was in the mill yard and the lane and the green beyond, because Eliza had thrown the doors open as she did every year, debt or no debt, pride or no pride. There was bread from her own flour, and the harbour was bright, and Tom was running mad with the other boys, and for 1 hour the trouble was set down. Nathaniel was beside her at the long table, sleeves rolled, flour on his forearms, and she had almost let the 3 days' patience soften back into the old warmth when she felt him go still. She knew that stillness now. The fair, the stranger. A carriage was coming up the lane. Not a farm cart, not the Reverend's gig. A carriage, black and glossed, and 4 matched horses, with a coat of arms on the door that flashed in the sun. The kind of vehicle that had never once in living memory come up the Greywater Mill Lane. The kind of vehicle the whole yard turned to stare at and went quiet to watch. It rolled into the yard and stopped, and a footman jumped down to set the step, and out of it came a slim, elegant man in a coat worth more than the mill, who looked at the flour and the feast and the gawping townsfolk with an expression of exquisite distaste, and then found Nathaniel's face in the crowd and smiled. "There you are," the elegant man said, into a silence so complete Eliza could hear the harbour. "Good God, there you actually are." He raised his voice, pitching it for the whole yard, savouring it. "Your Grace, this farce has gone on quite long enough. Your aunt is beside herself, the estate is a shambles, and I have spent 4 months and a great deal of money chasing you across the West Country. Do come home. Your Grace." The 2 words went through the yard like cold water through a gate. Eliza heard them, and did not at first understand them, because they did not belong in her yard, in her flower, beside the man who had cleared her tail race. She turned to look at Nathaniel, to share the strangeness of it, to ask who is this, and she saw his face, and she understood everything at once in a single dropping rush, before a word of explanation had been said. He stood frozen among the flour sacks, sleeves rolled, his face open in dread, and he had said not one word in his own defence, and he was not looking at the elegant man. He was looking at her. His name, the elegant man went on. He was enjoying it now. Every eye in the yard was on him, and he fed on eyes. Is Nathaniel Hale, Duke of Wycombe? He is my cousin. He is worth, I should think, more than this entire county, the harbour included. And he has spent your summer, my dear people, playing at poverty in your charming little mill for his own amusement. A duke, grinding your corn. He laughed, a light cruel sound. Have you been paying him? Oh, I do hope you've been paying him. The yard made a noise, a low collective intake, 100 repricings happening at once. Eliza watched it travel across the faces she had known all her life. She watched Mistress Pellow's hand go to her mouth. She watched Hesketh's jaw set in grim vindication. She watched Crail at the edge of the crowd, where she had not even known he was, light up like a man who has just been dealt a far better hand than he was playing. And she stood in the middle of it, in her apron, with flour on her cheek and bread in her hands, the millmaid who had hired a duke for copper, and danced with him on the green, and shown him her ruin by midnight, and trusted him, against her own judgment, for 3 days. She felt the whole town's eyes swing from the duke to her, and she heard, without his saying it, the thing the elegant man would say next. And he said it. Though I gather, the cousin said, looking at her now, looking her up and down and finding her wanting with one flick of his eyes. He found other amusements as well. Really, Nathaniel, a mill-maid. You always did have a sentimental streak. He sighed. It hardly signifies. He's promised elsewhere. A very suitable arrangement, the heartfelt heiress, all but settled. So you'll forgive me, my dear, if I take him off your hands. You may keep the apron. There it was. The whole of it. Every kind thing he had ever done repriced in front of her in the space of a minute. The dancing like a lord, the book on hydraulics, the Latin, the 2 clean vowels, the sealed letters, the I'll find the money said too fast. They were not mysteries any longer. They were the tells of a rich man slumming, a great man amusing himself, a fortune playing poor for sport and warming his hands at a poor woman's heart on the way through. And the 3 days she had given him against everything she knew, because she loved him. He had spent them lying. He had stood beside her at this very table not 1 hour ago and let her almost forgive him, knowing this carriage was on its road. She did not cry. Hold on to that. She would have cut off her own hand before she cried in that yard, in front of Crail's glee and Pellow's pity and the cousin's lazy contempt. She set the bread down on the table. She wiped her hands on her apron, slowly, one and then the other. The yard was utterly silent now, waiting. Eliza, Nathaniel said. It was the first word he had spoken. His voice was wrecked. Eliza, please, let me... Is it true? She did not look at him while she asked it. She looked at the harbour. Don't tell me anything else. Don't explain. One thing. Are you the Duke of Wycombe? Yes. Plainly. To his credit in the end, plainly. No flourish, no apology folded in to soften it. Yes, I am. And you knew about Crail's note, the terms, all of it, because you read my books at my own table. She still did not look at him, and the sealed letters were to your man, your great man's man, to do something about it with your great man's money. A pause. Yes. Then you can go home, your grace. She turned and looked at him now, and her eyes were dry and level, and they were the worst thing he had ever seen, worse than any weeping. You've a carriage and a cousin and an heiress all but settled. There's nothing for you here but flour and copper, and I think we both know now you were only ever playing with both. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. Get off my land. Don't come back to Greywater. If you ever cared for one true thing this summer, you'll do me that one kindness, and you'll go. The cousin made a small, satisfied sound and gestured to the carriage, and Nathaniel Hale, for the first time in his life, did not hide behind his rank to win. He could have. He could have stood on his title and pulled it open like a coat and bought his way back into her good opinion, with the very gold she would not take, declared the debt paid, and the heiress refused, and the truth half true, in front of everyone loud, the way the cousin would have done. He had the power. He held it in his hand, fully, for the first time in months. He did not spend it on himself. "You're owed the truth, and you'll have it," he said, low, only to her, while the yard strained to hear. "Not now, not like this, with him grinning and the whole town watching you bleed. You don't deserve to have it that way. But you're owed it, and you'll get it, and not one word of it will be what he just said." He looked at the cousin once with a cold that made the elegant man's smile slip half an inch. "I'm going because she asked me to. Mark that. Not because you came. I have never in my life done a single thing because you came." And he went. He picked up his poor folded coat from the wall where it had hung all summer, and he walked past the glossed black carriage without getting into it, and he went down the lane on foot the way he had come up it, a duke walking out of a mill yard with a knapsack, while behind him a woman stood very straight among the flour and did not cry until every last one of them was gone. The better part of a month went by, and it was the coldest month Greywater had ever known, though the weather had nothing to do with it. Eliza worked the mill alone. She rose earlier and slept worse and worked the gate by hand again, out of a kind of penance, as though the counterweight he had built were a thing she could not bear to use. The town, having repriced the Duke, set about repricing her, and could not decide what she was, the fool who had been gulled, or the schemer who had nearly landed a duke and missed. And the second story spread faster because it was crueler and people are like that. She let them talk. She had no room for them. She had room only for the mill and Tom and the column of figures that still, lie or no lie, duke or no duke, came due at Michaelmas. There was a letter he had left. Hesketh had pressed it into her hand the day after, unwilling, saying the Duke had given it to him on the way down the lane and made him swear to deliver it. It sat sealed on the mantel, not with a crest, she noticed, with a plain blob of wax, as though even in leaving he had tried to come to her as the man and not the title. She looked at it for 2 weeks. On the worst night, the night she let herself think about the loft and the table and the dancing all at once, she took it down and put it in the fire unread, and watched it burn, and then sat on the floor and wept because she would never now know what it said, and regretting it did not bring it back. Tom found her there. He sat down beside her, 14 and out of his depth and trying anyway. Why would a duke clean a tail race, he asked the fire, if he was only playing? You don't play at the worst job for a whole summer, Liza. Nobody plays that long. He picked at the floorboard. He taught me to splice a rope. Dukes don't. Why would he bother teaching me if it was all a game? I was nobody to him. She had no answer that did not hurt, so she gave him none, and held her brother by the fire, and the question sat in her with the burnt letter, and would not lie down. Then 2 things happened in the same week that took her cold, settled grief and turned it back into something live and confused. The first, Crail, 11 days from Michaelmas, sharpening to seize the mill, was suddenly and bewilderingly forced to release the note. The full sum had been paid. Paid in coin, paid in full, paid by an anonymous party through a solicitor in Truro, and Crail, who had moved heaven and earth to call the loan early so no one could buy it out from under him, had been bought out from under anyway, by someone faster and richer and quieter than he was. Greywater was free of debt. The wheel was hers, clear and whole in law forever. Eliza did not feel free. She felt sick. She knew exactly who had the money and the reach and the cause to do such a thing, and it was not gratitude that rose in her, it was fury. He thinks he can buy it back, she told Hesketh, white with it. The lie. He thinks he can pay off Crail and pay off me in the same coin and call us square. He thinks I'm a debt to be settled like the rest of this town. Well, I'm not for sale, and neither was anything I felt, and he can keep his great man's mercy. She would have sent the money back if she could have found where it came from, and the not being able to send it back, the being made free against her will by the man who had lied to her, was its own particular humiliation, and she nursed it like a coal. The second thing came up the lane a few days after, on foot, in good plain travelling clothes, leaning on a stick, a small, fierce old woman with the Duke's exact eyebrows and none of his patience, who marched into the yard and looked Eliza up and down once thoroughly and said, "So you're the mill maid who threw my nephew off her land? Good. I'd have thought less of you if you hadn't. Now put the kettle on, girl, my feet are killing me, and you and I are going to have a conversation you won't enjoy." Her name was Hester. She was Nathaniel's aunt, his father's sister, blunt as a hammer, and, Eliza understood within 5 minutes, the only person in his whole great empty life who had ever loved him for free. She drank her tea. She watched Eliza over the rim of the cup with eyes that missed nothing, and then she set down the cup and told her the truth that the cousin had been so careful to twist. "Percival told you Nathaniel paid your debt to own you," Hester said. "To buy back the lie you said to your foreman. Oh, news travels, girl, even to me. Now you listen, because I've ridden a long way to say it once. My nephew tried to buy that note from Crail weeks before that carriage ever came up your lane. Weeks, while he was still a journeyman to you, while you still thought him a nobody, when there was no lie to buy back yet because you didn't know there was a lie. He did it in secret, through his man Okays, expecting you would never know it was him, expecting nothing. No thanks, no apron, no kiss. Nothing. He wasn't buying you. He was trying to set you free and disappear out of the doing of it. The dates are in Oakes's ledger, everyone, and you may see them with your own eyes if you think an old woman lies." She paused. "He bungled it terribly. He's a clever man and a fool, like all clever men. But he was never, not for 1 hour, the thing my nephew Percival told you he was." Eliza sat with her tea going cold and felt the whole shape of the summer turn over in the dark, like a key. "There's more," Hester said, more quietly. "And this is the part you need most, so attend. There's no heiress. There was a scheme of Percival's to marry Nathaniel off to the Hartfell money and patch the estate's accounts and keep my nephew where Percival could manage him. That part was true. The arrangement was real, all but settled, as the wretch said. But Nathaniel refused it flat, to Percival's face, after he left here. Said he would lose the whole estate, every acre, before he would marry to order, and he has gone back to Wycombe to face the ruin of it alone, rather than save himself by a marriage he doesn't want, and rather, mark me, than drag you into a duke's scandal you never asked for. He didn't fight for himself in your yard because he didn't think he'd earned the right to. He paid your debt and asked nothing. He refused a fortune and told no one why." The old woman's voice was not gentle, but it was true. "That is not a man who was playing with you, girl. That is a man who loved you so badly and so stupidly that he lied to keep it, and lost it for the lying, and has gone home to be ruined in silence so as not to cost you a thing. The lie was a coward's kindness. It was never a cruelty. There is a difference, and you are wise enough to know it." For a long time Eliza did not speak. The fire ticked. Out in the yard, Tom was teaching the goat something it did not want to learn. "It doesn't change what I am," she said at last, and her voice was steady and low and full of the old hard practical fear. "Even if every word of that is true, I'm a miller. I have flour under my nails and a brother to raise and a wheel that needs me. I won't go to a great house and be looked at the way that cousin looked at me. I won't be a duke's secret kept in the country, and I won't be a duke's charity dressed up as a wife, and I won't chase a man to 100 rooms to be made small in every one of them. I'd rather lose him than lose myself, and I've already lost him so." She stood and gathered the cups. "So I'll thank you for the truth, and I'll keep my mill, and I'll stay exactly where I am, which is where I belong." Hester looked at her a long moment, and something almost like approval moved in the fierce old face. "Well," she said, rising, reaching for her stick, "you're not wrong to want it on your own terms. I shan't argue you out of your pride, girl. I rather like it." She paused at the door. "But I'll tell you this for nothing. The two of you are each waiting for the other to come and lose themselves. He won't ask you to be a duchess. You won't go and be made small. So you'll each keep your pride and lose the rest, and be very correct and very alone, until something comes along big enough to knock you both off your high ground at once." She set her hat on. "In my experience, something usually does. Mind the river, this time of year. It's the only thing in this town higher than the pair of you." And she went, and Eliza stood in the doorway watching the small, fierce figure go down the lane, and did not yet know that the old woman had, without meaning to, named the very thing that was coming. The storm came up out of the southwest 3 nights later, the worst the harbour had seen in 20 years, and the river that turned the Greywater wheel rose with it in the dark. Eliza woke to Hesketh hammering on the door and the sound of water, where water should not be. The Greywater set the height of the whole valley's flood. Her sluice, the one Nathaniel had rebuilt, held the head of water that the lower mills and the bottom cottages of the town all sat beneath. If the gate failed, if the rebuilt counterweight gave under a flood it had never been tested against, The river would come through all at once and take the lower town with it. She knew it the moment she was awake. She was dressed and out in the rain with a lantern before Tom had his boots on, and Hesketh behind her, and a handful of men who came stumbling up through the downpour, because when the grey water is in danger, every man in the lower town is in danger, and they all knew it. It was chaos and black water and rain like thrown gravel. They fought to clear the racing debris from the gate, to shore the bank, to get the grain stores up out of the rising wet, and the river kept coming, brown and furious, climbing the platform inch by inch, and the gate Nathaniel had built groaned under a load it was never made to hold, and Eliza, soaked through and screaming orders the wind tore away, knew with a sick clarity that they were going to lose it. The counterweight was singing under the strain. One man could raise the gate that three had needed, but no one alive knew how to ease that load in a flood, how to play the clever cantilevered thing against a river trying to tear it off its mounting, because only one man had ever understood how it worked, and she had sent him down the lane. And then he was there. He came up out of the dark and the rain on a half-foundered horse, no carriage, no crest, no footman, his good coat soaked black and ruined, having ridden through the whole of that murderous night from God knew, where the moment the word reached him that the grey water was in flood. He did not arrive as a duke. There was no announcement, no bow, no "Your Grace." He swung down off the staggering horse into the muck and ran for the platform with his sleeves already going up his arms. And the first words out of him were not to her and not about himself. "The counterweight," he roared over the river, to Hesketh, to the men. "Don't fight the gate, you'll tear the mount out. Ease the chain, let it ride. Let the water carry half the load, like this. Give me the bar." And he showed them, soaked and freezing, on the same platform where he had laughed at her arithmetic and danced was 100 years ago. He played the clever thing he had built against the flood the way a man plays a great fish, easing where they had been hauling, letting the river do half the work of holding its own gate, and the groaning eased, and the singing stopped, and the gate held. The skill from the very first week, the counterweight no village millwright would know, the book on hydraulics no journeyman reads, all of it paid off in the one night it was ever truly needed. They worked shoulder to shoulder in the black water until the dawn came grey and exhausted, and in the thick of it, in the doing of it, the whole question of who he was simply dissolved. He was not a duke on that platform, and he was not a journeyman. He was the man beside her with his hands on the bar and the water at his waist, and she was the woman beside him, and they saved the mill and they saved the grain, and they saved the lower town, the two of them and the men, against the river, together, the way they had done everything that had ever been good between them. When it broke, when the river finally turned and began, grudging, to fall, and the men sagged where they stood, and someone began weakly to laugh, Eliza and Nathaniel were left at the rail in the grey light, soaked to the bone, shaking with cold and effort, and there was nothing left to do but the thing they had been not doing for a month. "You came back," she said. Her teeth were chattering. It was not quite an accusation, and not quite a welcome. Word reached Wycombe that the grey water was in flood. He could barely get the words out for the cold. "I didn't think about it. I was on a horse before I'd finished reading it. I'd have come if you'd had Hesketh meet me at the boundary with a gun." He turned to face her, and he did not reach for her, and that mattered. "I owe you the truth, and you said not like that," with him grinning. He's not grinning now. So here it is, and it's 3 things, and then I'll go, if you tell me to. The rain had thinned to almost nothing. The men had drifted off toward the dry and the fire. It was just the 2 of them, and the falling river. I ran from Wycombe because I had been a duke since I was 19, and a man to no one, ever, and I wanted to know if I could be wanted with nothing in my hands. That's the first thing, and it's vanity, and I'm not proud of it. He held up a second finger, shaking. "I tried to buy your debt in secret weeks before the carriage came, before there was any lie to undo, because I could not bear to watch Crail take this place, and I knew you'd never let me give you a thing. I meant for you never to know it was me. That's the second thing, and it was cowardice dressed as kindness, and it cost us everything, and I'd undo it if I could." He stopped. His voice went down to almost nothing under the river sound. "The third thing is the only one that matters, and it's the one he made ugly, and it isn't. I refused the heiress. I refused the whole arrangement, and I'd have refused it if I'd never met you, but I met you, so. There's no one settled elsewhere. There never will be." He looked at her, ruined and freezing and absolutely steady. "I lied about my name. I never once lied about wanting you. Not on the harbour road, not at the table, not for 1 hour of this whole summer. The name was false. Everything under it was true. That's all three. That's the whole of it." Eliza stood in the grey light with the river falling behind her and looked at the man who had ridden through a killing night to ease a chain. Only he understood. Who had come with no crest and gone straight for the bar, who had refused a fortune and paid her debt and asked for nothing, and lost her for the lying, and come back anyway, the first hour she was in danger. She did not forgive him, because he was a duke. Hold on to that, because it is the whole point of the thing. She forgave him because he came back as a man and put his hands on the bar. "Here are my terms," she said, and her voice was the plain, flat voice she used for everything true, steady now despite the cold. "And they're not negotiable, and I'd rather have nothing than have them bent. I won't be a duke's secret, kept in the country and visited between the seasons. And I won't be a duke's charity, taken up because he felt the want of being good for once. If you want me, you have me as a partner, an equal. My name stays on that door. I grind the corn and I keep the books, and I am nobody's rescued thing. You'll have me on the level you found me on, or you won't have me, your grace, and I'll mean it the same way I meant get off my land, all the way down." "On the level I found you on," he said. "Yes. God, yes. That's the only level I ever wanted you on. It's the only place I was ever real. And there, on the riverbank, soaked through and grey with cold, with the flood falling and the mill saved behind them, and not one witness but the gulls, he kissed her, or she kissed him, and afterward neither of them was ever sure which, and it did not matter, because for once in both their lives it was exactly equal. The rest came out in the daylight, and it came out hard, the way Greywater liked its justice. Crail was finished. O'Kays, the Duke's quiet, thorough man of business, who had grieved his master's absence and rejoiced at his return, and brought, when he came, a strong box of paper, had not only bought the Greywater note. In the weeks of inquiring after it he had pulled the whole thread, and the whole thread led back to a pattern. Crail had been writing the same drunk, desperate clauses into half the loans in the lower town, calling them early, seizing on the technicalities, building himself a quiet little empire out of other people's bad nights. It was all there, dated, witnessed, in Crail's own greedy hand. It went to the magistrates, and it went, because the new Duke of Wycombe knew exactly how the world worked when he chose to use it, to the county paper as well. Crail's debts were called in by the men he had cheated. His clauses were thrown out one after another in open session. Restitution was read against him line by line. The precise predatory yardstick he had used on the town turned and laid against his own throat, and he left Greywater a ruined man on the same road he had so often threatened others off of, and not one soul came up the lane to say how hard it was for him. Percival Vane was sent off too, his marriage brokering dead, the Hartfell arrangement publicly refused, his 4 months of hunting and scheming come to exactly nothing. The estate's interests would be secured, the Duke informed him, in the Duke's own way, by the Duke's own hand, and there would be no further use for a cousin who managed people. Percival went back to wherever such men go, lighter by a fortune he had counted as good as his, and the last anyone heard he was very correct and very poor and complained of both. The money plot closed, every thread of it, debt and scheme and stolen clause settled on the open page where the whole town could read it. There was only one thing left open at the end of that long grey day, and it was not a question, it was a hope. Spring came again to the harbour, and the wheel was turning. It turned full and sweet, the way it had the day he mended the gate, off a river run back down to its banks and behaving itself, and the flower that came off the Greywater stones that spring was the brightest and the most sought after for 30 miles, because the mill was jointly run now, and run well, and because the name on the door, and you may go and read it, it is still there, said Wren, and beneath it, smaller, in a hand that had finally stopped trying to be a journeyman's, said, "And hail." Tom was apprenticed proper to a shipwright down the quay, and came home Sundays full of the sea and longer in the wrist than ever. Hesketh, who had spotted the crest and been right and taken no joy in it, had been made foreman in name as well as fact, and approved of the new arrangement in the only way he knew how, which was to complain about it constantly and never once leave. He liked the Duke now. He would have died before he said so. Nathaniel, no longer hiding, no longer a man to no one, split his time between the great house at Wycombe and the mill at Greywater, and he was reforming the estate the way he had learned to do everything that ever mattered to him. Hands-on, in the muck, easing the load instead of hauling at it, against the advice of every steward who thought a duke should be bowed to and not seen. The 100 rooms were less empty. Aunt Hester had come to live in a dozen of them and terrorised the staff, and was happier than she had been in years. The tenants, who had been numbers in a ledger, were learning the shape of a landlord who came and looked at the gate himself. He asked her on the key in the end, not in a ballroom and not on one knee with a velvet box, but standing at the harbour rail in the early light, with the tide coming in and the gulls arguing overhead and flower. She noted, on his forearms again, where it belonged. He did not offer her a title. He had learned better than that. "I'm not offering you a great house," he said. "You'd hate it, and you'd be right to. I'm offering you the thing we already have, a partnership, equal shares, equal say, your name first on the door and on everything else. Marry me, Eliza, on the only terms you ever named, as a partner, on the level I found you on, nobody's secret and nobody's charity, for the whole of both our lives." He paused, and the dry edge came back into his voice, the one she had loved before she knew anything else about him. "I'd kneel, but the key's filthy, and you taught me better than to ruin a good pair of trousers for a gesture." "You learned that here," she said. "I learned everything here." She said yes. She said it plainly, the way she said everything true, and she said it on her terms, kept, every one of them to the letter, for the rest of their lives. And the last of it, the image to carry away, was the two of them at the harbour rail in the spring light, watching the tide come up the same way it had 100 times that summer, the great wheel turning sweet and steady behind them, the man who had been a duke and the woman who had never been anything but exactly herself, side by side and level. "This was the first place I was ever just myself," he said, looking at the water. "It's the place I want to be the rest of my life." "Then stay," she said. "Mind the books, mind the gate, and don't ever again let me hear you swear in Latin where Hesketh can hear you." "On the level I found you on," he said, and meant it, and the wheel turned and the tide came in. Because here, in the end, is the whole of what happened at Greywater Mill, and it is the thing worth carrying out of it. A name can be borrowed and a coat can be worn thin on purpose, and a fortune can be hidden in a knapsack, but the way a person is in a room when they think no one is counting, that cannot be faked, and it cannot be bought, and in the long account of a life it outvalues every acre and every crest and every great empty room. She hired him in copper. He was worth a county, and the only true wealth either of them ever found was the one they built with their own hands, on the level, in the flower, where neither rank nor ruin could reach it. If this story moved you, do the small free thing that keeps stories like it coming. Subscribe and leave a comment, because we genuinely read them. Tell us this: was Nathaniel's lie a coward's cruelty or a coward's kindness? And would you have given him the 3 days, or thrown him down the lane the night you saw the crest? And while you are at it, tell us where in the world you are listening from. We love to know. Until the next one, mind the river and mind the people who are kind when they think no one is counting.